Imagine this. You're standing alone in a Viking graveyard. The north wind shrieks through moss-covered stones. Snow freckles the surface of ancient burial mounds. Suddenly, the ground right beneath your feet cracks just a little. A bruised purple hand, swollen and puffed, with nails long like an animal's claws, slowly pushes up through the frozen earth. This isn't a Hollywood zombie, not some shambling corpse staggering through a shopping mall. Whatever is crawling out of that mound is something entirely different. Smarter, more cruel, and full of hatred. The Norse called it a Draugr. So here's the question. If you had to choose between being chased down a city street by a horde of zombies or being hunted in a blizzard by a single Draugr, which one would you pick? Zombies we know all too well from movies, but Draugr are almost absent from modern pop culture, even though the Vikings have feared them for over 1,000 years. Why would a civilization used to bloodshed, killing, and conquest tremble before this special kind of undead? And more importantly, in what way is a Draugr really different from a zombie? Are we talking about two completely different kinds of fear, or just two versions of the same nightmare that has haunted humanity since forever? In today's video, we'll walk along the stormy coasts of the north, step into frozen stone barrows, listen to the old saga tales, and figure out what a Draugr actually is, how it lives, dies, and comes back. From there, we'll compare it with the modern zombie and decode what people in the old days were truly afraid of when they imagined corpses that refused to stay in their graves. In ancient Scandinavia, winter wasn't just snow and cold wind. It was a trial of survival. Farmsteads lay scattered among hills and mountains, torchlight in the night like tiny red coals floating in an endless black sea. The nights were so long people felt as if daylight might never return. In that setting, death wasn't something distant. Vikings lived with death. They ate with it. They rode out to sea with it, never sure if they would see home again. And yet there was something even more terrifying than death itself. Those who had already died, but still refused to leave this world. The Draugr, in the Norse imagination, was not a vague ghost, but an actual corpse. Its flesh was swollen and discolored, deep purple or dark greenish blue, like a body that's been cold for far too long. Its body swelled, heavy and dense, as if some supernatural force had been stuffed into every muscle. It wasn't transparent. It didn't float. It was so heavy that its footsteps could make wooden floors shake. Its hands could break a living person's bones with sheer brute strength. To the Vikings, a Draugr was a dead body that was still there, in the grave, in the room it once lived in, carrying all the weight, stench, and physical presence that would horrify anyone who saw it. Most of the time, Draugr are tied to stone mounds, to burial hills where the rich or mighty warriors were buried. The Norse didn't just bury bodies, they buried entire worlds. Weapons, armor, jewelry, sometimes even sacrificed slaves or horses. It was a treasure hoard sleeping beneath the earth, and the Draugr was seen as the guardian of that hoard after death. It wasn't just an undead body. It was the former owner, still clinging to its treasure, refusing to share it with the living, even though its life was already over. That's why, in many stories, the Draugr appears as an immortal guard, never resting, ready to tear apart anyone foolish enough to come near. Imagine a winter night. A group of men decide to dig up an old chieftain's grave to retrieve the legendary sword they believe was buried with him. They dig in the cutting wind, torches flickering, breath steaming in the air. When they finally pull aside the stone that seals the tomb, a thick, nauseating stench slams into them, so strong that two of the weaker men collapse right there at the entrance. In the darkness behind the stone is a massive black shape, sitting upright in the grave, not lying down. It's not a lifeless corpse waiting there. it's something that has been expecting them. Tales like this appear in many sagas, where the living have to wrestle with a Draugr in the cramped space of a mound, bones slamming against stone, growls and grunts mixing with the sound of the wind screaming outside. In sagas like Grettis Saga and other legends, the Draugr doesn't fight only with brute strength. It also has powers the Vikings called dark magic. A Draugr can enlarge its body, becoming as huge as a monster. It can manipulate the weather, summoning fog, blizzards, a suffocating darkness to make the living lose their way. Some stories tell of Draugr transforming into animals. A flayed cow with no skin, a broken-backed horse, or a black cat that grows heavier and heavier on a sleeping person's chest until they can't breathe. That's not the kind of zombie that only knows how to bite. It's an active force that knows how to play with your mind, to plant fear from a distance before ever showing its face. Another terrifying thing is that Draugr aren't confined to their graves. While some are bound to the burial site, others can leave and roam the land, ruining crops, killing livestock, chasing herds of sheep and cattle until they collapse and die of exhaustion. It can step into a house, sit in its old place at the table, staring at the family huddled and shaking in the corner. It can walk along the shoreline, appearing in the mist, driving sailors mad. To people back then, the Draugr wasn't something that stayed in its grave and behaved itself. It was a nightmare that could spill into daily life, shattering the thin border between the living and the dead. What's interesting is that not everyone who died became a Draugr. Scandinavian tales often mention people who, in life, were cruel, greedy, hateful, or who died consumed by rage and resentment. Those who could not let go of their wealth, those who could not forgive their enemies, those who had sown too much evil after death, they were more likely to become Draugr. In other words, a Draugr is not just a random undead. It's a continuation of a certain kind of life. They carry their old personality with them, but pushed to a more extreme, twisted, malevolent level. If a zombie is an empty shell, then a Draugr is a heavy soul trapped in a corpse, refusing to move on. In the stories, killing a Draugr is never simple. Knocking it down once isn't enough. Driving a sword through its chest might not do anything. Heroes in the sagas often have to wrestle it physically, overpower the Draugr, drag it back into its grave, then cut off its head, burn the body, scatter the ashes into the sea, sometimes even hammer a stake through the chest, just to make sure it never returns. These rituals show that the Norse believed that if you don't handle things the right way, death is not really the final full stop. In a sense, the Draugr is the embodiment of a fear. What if evil doesn't die with a person, but clings to their body and keeps on existing? Alongside the walking Draugr, there's also an image of corpses that remain lying in their graves, but whose minds are still awake. They sit in strange positions, eyes open, staring at the ceiling of the tomb or at the moon through a crack. There's a legend about a famous warrior who was buried, yet people saw his grave slightly ajar and saw him turning his head to look at the moon, his eyes glowing. Gathered around these stories is a feeling that death is not like someone switching off a light completely. It's more like someone still awake in the dark. Looking back, we can see that the Draugr is a very complex creature. It has a real body, physical strength, magic, memory, motive, and especially powerful negative emotions like jealousy, greed, hatred. It's jealous of the living who still breathe, eat, and love, while it is imprisoned in cold soil. It is greedy for its grave goods, unwilling to let anyone touch them. It hates those who wronged it in life, or forgot it after death. All of this turns the Draugr into a personal nightmare, a specific enemy with a name, a past, coming back to find you. Now, let's compare that to the zombie image we're familiar with from movies. Most modern zombies, especially the apocalyptic outbreak type that exploded in 20th century film, are mindless undead. They're infected by a virus, a curse, some chemical or biological accident. They don't remember who they are. They have no identity, no sense of friend or foe, no treasures to guard, no personal grudges. They're just hungry mouths, always wanting to bite more, infect more. They are scary, not because each zombie is intelligent, but because of their sheer numbers, the endless wave that can drown entire cities. Zombies also differ from Draugr in that they're usually tied to images of cities, science, and modernity. Empty streets, shopping malls, hospitals, cramped apartments, buses, subways. The fear isn't hiding in an ancient hilltop graveyard. It's hiding right inside ordinary, civilized life. When zombies swarm, they smash social order, collapse governments, armies, hospitals. They are the nightmare of a modern world gone out of control. Draugr, by contrast, belong to another world entirely. The world of remote villages, rocky hills, falling snow, wooden houses, stone graves on windswept ridges. One is the nightmare of the industrial and post-industrial age. The other is the nightmare of the agricultural, tribal, warrior age. If zombies are symbols of collective fear, then Draugr is a deeply personal fear. Zombies don't care who you are. Draugr knows you very well. It might be the cruel master who dies and comes back to haunt his former servants. It might be a bloodthirsty warrior who, after death, still rides a dead horse across the fields. It might be a family member enraged by being buried carelessly, returning to demand justice. These stories reflect anxieties about relationships between people, about whether we treat one another properly while we're alive, and whether we honor the dead in the right way. A crucial point here is the funeral ritual. The Norse believed that if the proper rites weren't performed, if the burial was sloppy, if people failed their duties toward the dead, the chance of that person becoming a Draugr went up. This shows that the Draugr image doubles as a social warning. Respect death, respect shared rules, or the dead will come back to claim what's owed. In a small community where everyone knows everyone, a corpse getting up isn't just a horror story. It's the collapse of moral order. Modern zombies, meanwhile, often embody very different anxieties. A zombie outbreak can be read as a metaphor for disease, for biowarfare, for ecological collapse, or for consumerism. Some analyses point out that scenes of zombies shambling into shopping malls, staggering among goods, are an exaggerated image of modern humans. Alive but soulless, shopping on reflex, following the crowd without thinking. From that angle, the zombie isn't a single evil person, but a crowd that has lost its mind. It's also interesting to look at how each creature is killed in our stories. Zombies usually follow a simple rule: shoot the head, destroy the brain. It fits scientific thinking. Find the mechanism, then break it. With Draugr, the solution is more complicated, a mix of violence and ritual. You don't just fight it. You have to place it back into the correct order of the universe. Cut off the head, burn the body, scatter the ashes into the sea, sometimes accompanied by words and gestures with ritual meaning. That reflects two different systems of belief. One trusts in natural and biological laws, the other in a sacred cosmic order. So if we ask, how is a Draugr different from a zombie? The answer isn't just in appearance or abilities. It lies in the entire ecosystem of meaning around them. Draugr are products of a world where humans constantly faced harsh nature, where death was close, communities were small, and faith in gods and rituals was strong. In that world, the undead was a warning about greed, hatred, disrespect for the dead, and the risk of social breakdown. Zombies are products of a crowded, urban, globalized world where people fear pandemics, fear losing control, fear becoming part of a mindless crowd swept along by systems larger than themselves. You could say that Draugr is like a mirror in which the Norse looked at the dark part of themselves: greed, brutality, stubbornness, refusal to let go. Zombies are the mirror of the modern age. the spread of fear, of information, of trends, things that turn people into creatures acting on instinct without thought. One is us after death, still clinging to life. The other is us while still alive, but already hollow. Looking at both, it's fascinating that the same fear, the dead won't stay dead, is handled in such different ways by two cultures in two different eras. Both have bodies, both rot, can stink, both have empty eyes, but the meaning behind them is not the same at all. That's why creatures like Draugr and zombies endure in culture. They're not just monsters. They're open questions about what it means to be human. In modern games and films inspired by Norse myth, Draugr are often simplified into Viking zombies, bony monsters in helmets, wielding axes. That image is easy to understand and easy to use in design. But if we go all the way back to the sagas and legends, we find something far more complex. A Draugr is a warrior, a landowner, a miser, a sorcerer, a vengeful spirit all mixed together. When you face it, you're not just up against a random monster. You're facing an entire story about the past, about bad decisions, about broken relationships. In the end, maybe the most important question isn't which is scarier, Draugr or zombie, but which kind of fear touches us more deeply. For someone living in a modern city, zombies may feel closer because they're linked to high rises, hospitals, media, things we see every day. But for those who like to look farther, who like to listen to the wind howl over snow-covered hills, who like to imagine themselves walking through a Norse pine forest under a dim moon, a Draugr might be much more terrifying, because it reminds us that sometimes the thing that refuses to die isn't the body, but greed, hatred, and all the things we refuse to let go. And maybe that's why the Vikings needed a figure like the Draugr. In a world where they could die at any moment, they had to believe that what they did, how they lived, how they buried their dead, how they treated each other would decide whether they got to rest in peace. In that sense, the Draugr is both a monster and a warning. Live in such a way that when you finally lie down, you don't need to come back.